All right, cool. So we're going to go over some really simple stuff to get you ready to work with jQuery. The first thing we're going to talk about is string concatenation. This goes back to our previous lesson about adding, just the plus operator. I don't know if you remember that from the very, very first thing we talked about. But this is just a slightly more advanced use of the plus operator, and we're just using it to shove strings together. String is any collection of characters you've got. So here are examples of two strings, what up and world. First part is what up, second part is world. We can add them together. First part plus second part is equal to what up world. Now it's kind of annoying because there's no spaces, right? It's just all run together. Nobody wants to run all their sentences and words together. So we can write inline strings and we can add spaces. So now if we add first part plus a space plus second part, then we get what up world with a little space between them. So here's a simple function that I wrote. It's just a really you would probably never use this, but it's just an example of how to do a function with these. So I can take in an array of words, for example, and then I can just continuously add on to the first word. So you basically just keep adding a space and then the next word, and then a space and then the next word until we're out of words. So if I wanted to concatenate all of these words together, hello there, you magnificent world, then the whole thing's going to turn out to be hello there, you magnificent world. Notice that I did have to put the comma in there manually because I don't compensate for that. So basically all you need to know about string concatenations to work with in jQuery, and you will probably do a bunch of string concatenation in jQuery, is you can declare them as separate strings and add them together, or you can add them all together in line. Like that. Just make sure that when you're messing with stuff, you like adding like this, that you do leave spaces at the end, because otherwise it's all going to run together. There you go. That was nice. Anybody have any questions about string concatenation?
That just becomes one string called hello there, I am strings.
Yep. So test is now hello there, I am strings.
And why do you do that?
Well, usually, so in jQuery, usually the reason is, and you'll see this later on, but usually the reason is you've got some kind of basic starting string, right? And you've got some kind of basic ending string. And maybe you want to put in some content, so let's say start plus hello out of there plus div end, or maybe you want to do a loop. So for an var I is less than 10 plus. So let's say we're in this loop and we just want to create list items. Maybe we want to say, and this is going to be a good little intro here to something else. So, here's an excellent example of something that's kind of unusual about JavaScript. You can add an integer or a float or anything to a string, and it becomes a string. So this will create a list item with the text 1 inside of it, a list item, 0, the list item with the text 2, 3, 4, 5, whatever, all the way up to 9, I guess, because it's less than 10. So be aware that that is a very useful feature if you want to be iterating over a chunk of objects and you want to spit them all out into list items, or you want to, maybe you want to alert all of them because you want to make a pop-up machine, I don't know. But that's one of the main features for the reasons people use string concatenation is to mess with HTML.
Right. Perfect. So the way that you're doing it now, it's overriding it every time. You normally want to make that an array. Right?
Yeah. Well, so actually, what it does is it creates a new object list item each time. So if I were to come up here and say something like that, it wouldn't know what the previous list item was.
Right. So right.
So it would be null. It hasn't been declared yet until we get to that.
Okay.
So presumably you would want to declare maybe list items out here, and then say list items plus equals, something like that. So that would just keep adding list items onto there.
1, 2, 3, 4, yeah.
Yep. All right. Any other questions about string concatenation, shoving strings together? No? We good? Cool. So HTML. Most people here probably know what HTML is, but I just want to go over it briefly because it's important for jQuery. So we've got two types of tags in HTML. There are tags with regular closing tags, and then there are self-closing tags, which are sometimes called voids. I've never heard it used in the wild, but apparently that's the official name. Whatever. The difference is anything with a opening tag and a closing tag has to have some kind of text content between the tags, or has to be able to have some kind of text content between those tags. The void tags, obviously, because they are self-closing, you can't put any text content in there. You can have attributes, so you might, for example, have, let's see, our source, right? So here's an image. We've got bunnies.jpg, but you can't say some stuff, or at least if you do, browsers will yell at you. Technically, you can throw a lot of things at browsers, and it will accept it and just move on.
But it might not be what you expect.
But it might not be what you expect, and it definitely won't be appreciated by the W3C. So those are the types of tags. The ones we're going to be using a lot are the script tags, because that's where our JavaScript goes. You could also write all your JavaScript in an external file and include it like this. Notice that's not a self-closing tag. It's just a opening and a closing with nothing in between. So that signifies we want to load this source instead of input any
So
stuff
the
in there.
script tag is the one exception to the rule of the content in between?
It doesn't have to have content between them, but it has to be able to have content. So if I put content in here, it would be meaningful to the page.
Okay.
So those are things like anchors, divs. You'll see those are like pretty big. Anchors are links to other pages. Divs are just a standard division that people use all over the place to make boxes or any kind of content really they shove in divs.
It's a box.
Yep. Input tags are what you'll primarily be taking people's input from, right? So anytime they can react with the website, it's going to usually be an input tag, whether it's a text box, a checkbox, a button, things like that. That's those are the tags that you're going to want to pull data in from. And then here is the very, very, very most basic HTML you'll see. Technically, you don't even have to have a header in there, but it's good to have one. And usually what you got is your HTML tags that enclose the entire thing, and then you got your header, which is where scripts and styles and meta tags and things will go, and then your body where actual stuff is going to be shoved, right? So again, I'm pretty sure we're all familiar with this, and this isn't an HTML lesson, but that's the rough things you'll need to know. And we're going to similarly do CSS. CSS is combined with HTML to produce pretty things on the screen. There's a couple ways you can use CSS to target various tags. You can use IDs with the hash sign, and that will target anything. For example, my ID, hash my ID, targets an attribute of ID equals my ID. So if you have an anchor tag, if you have a div, anything that had that ID would be targeted. The hash symbol, the ID concept, you should only have one ID per page that's named the same. So please don't make like 50 of them called my ID. It makes things very confusing, and browsers don't like it. But it is, the hash sign, for example, takes precedence over the dot sign. So dots are classes. Classes, you can have like 50 of them on the page, 100 of them on the page. It doesn't matter.
Name.
Yep, of the same name. So this is a way to target groups of things. You could have all the divs with my class and all of the anchors with my class, and they might have the same color text, for example, or the same font size, or they might all, be 100 pixels wide for some reason. So classes are used to generically target things, and then IDs are used to specifically target things. And finally, not quite finally, but close to finally, you can just use the name of the tag. This is a very generic thing, so be careful with it. If you're targeting every div on the page, make sure that you're doing something generic to those divs. Yeah. And then here's the finally, is you can use attributes. If you notice this from JavaScript, the brackets. In CSS, it's targeting a particular attribute. In this case, the attribute we're targeting is type, and the value we're targeting is text box. And you'll notice I placed it directly next to the input. So that means all the input tags with a type attribute equal to text box. You probably won't have to use this too much, but it will crop up in jQuery occasionally. So just be aware of it and keep it in the back of your mind. These are some super simple examples of things you can do. So we've got style tags to indicate that we're going to do some CSS. And in here we've declared a class of my class. You've got a color, and you'll notice it's equal to £F00. Whenever you see this pound thing in CSS, that if it's not an ID, that's a trick. If it's not starting things, hash sound means hexadecimal. So these are hexadecimal color codes. F00 happens to be shorthand for FF0000. And basically these are the reds. The higher numbers and letters you go, the better. F's are the highest. These are the greens, and these last two are the blues. So you can tell this is a red. It's RGB. So if the F's were all the way over here as well, oops, I'll just drag that stuff around, then you'd be looking at kind of a purpley thing going on, because you got all the red and all the blue, and that's going to make it all weird and purpley. So keep in mind that you can use just the word red, I believe. It's kind of a little hacky, but there is a list of colors that you can use just the words for. And then here are two other little styles. These are some ones that you should probably keep in the back of your mind, because I'm going to use them in a second. That's why. So floating makes things slide to the left, like it just keeps them piling on to the left in a row. And then if you want to end that concept of floating, you can add a div that quote unquote clears. Clear both happens to clear in both directions. You can clear specifically in a direction, but I always clear in both directions because F it. You don't need to do this to stop a row from building up, but it's the simplest way, and so we're going to use that if we feel like it. So keep in mind that this may be useful in your homework. All right, so that was it. That's the pre-jQuery stuff. Does anyone have any questions on the pre-jQuery stuff? We good? It's pretty simple stuff. It's just, you can look up tutorials if you're confused on the internets. All right, let's chat jQuery. I love jQuery. I'm going to drag this guy over here. Oh, there we go. Make it all big, all bigificated. So jQuery it's a type of JavaScript. It's a much simpler way to target the front end than standard JavaScript, right? When it was developed, people were having to rely on all kinds of crazy functions, and they weren't always cross-compatible, and so it's kind of an abstraction on top of JavaScript. It's a way to not have to deal with the insanity of manually accessing all this stuff. You'll see it all over the place, and the easiest way to recognize it is the second thing right here, this shortcut, $. You'll see, anytime you see $, parentheses, it's almost always jQuery. But it doesn't have to be. You can actually write jQuery out, lowercase j, capital query, and pass in your values, and they will be equivalent. It's just more verbose. So I would recommend using the $sign because, come on, nobody wants to keep writing jQuery over and over and over. So back to our CSS stuff. You can target tags. You can target tags via CSS IDs, classes, just the tag name itself. Here's an example of how you would target a class. Notice that it uses the same strategy as CSS uses. It uses a dot to denote my class is a class type. Down here, we're going to change the world. More specifically, we're going to hide the world because we're going to target the ID of the world. So you might have the world. And this specific code would log on, say, I'm looking for a hash sign, so that means an ID. Here's the world. I'm going to hide it, and it will make it invisible. Uses a couple strategies to do that. I think one of the ones is it makes it a height of 0 and a width of 0 maybe, and a display of none. I'm not positive. It's all CSS-y. But you don't need to worry about that too much at the moment because we're probably not going to be hiding stuff yet. I just want you to be aware that you can target things with hash signs, you can target things with dots, and you can target things with tags. You can also edit things in line with CSS. So you can call the .css function and pass it your new information that you want to change it to. For example, I gave that too many. So in this case, can anyone tell me what we're going to do with the town?
Change the color.
Change the color.
To red.
So we're going to paint the town red. Awesome. That's right.
It is a riddle.
So those are some very basic things on how to target stuff with jQuery. Does anyone have any questions on that before I move on?
How many functions are there that this jQuery has?
There are
CSS,
tons.
the whole-
There's a bunch of them. I don't want you to worry too much about the specific methods or the specific functions that exist in jQuery yet because there's so many that I just, I couldn't go over them in an hour. It just wouldn't work. Like I would be sitting here for hours.
There's a
just reading them.
jQuery site out there though that you can find anything. on.
Absolutely. jQuery has its own site, its own lookup. You can go on there, you can see all the functions, you can see what they do. I'm just giving you a brief overview so that you can go find ones that appeal to you.
Yep.
I'll tell you the ones that I use a lot: hide and show, animate, which lets you specify you can move things, over a certain number of seconds. You can change their color over a couple seconds. Actually, I don't think you can anymore. I think you need an add-on for that, but you can do a whole bunch of animations. You can change CSS. I add classes and remove classes. That's a common one too. All right. So are we good with those though? These are the basic targeting concepts. Not so much these. These can come later, but this part is the one that I want you to focus on. All right. So next up are events. Events are super important in jQuery. Lots and lots of things are events. Anything you're doing with the browser, if someone's clicking in the browser, if someone's typing in the browser, if someone's resizing the browser, all those things are events. So those are user-driven events, like those are all things that people do. But there's also events that the browser itself does. For example, you might set up a timer. Every 5 seconds, something could happen. One of the common ones you'll see that I'll reference later on is there's a load event that happens after the browser has loaded all of the elements, so everything on the page is set up. Then it fires the load event, and that's like your cue that you can do stuff. So effectively, anytime you're referencing event in jQuery, jQuery is going out and like staring at that thing, waiting for it to happen. It's like, all right, we'll fire. So the more you have, the slower things can go, especially if they're events like timers. Those are a big pain in the butt. Click events aren't too bad because people aren't clicking fast. They're not clicking a whole bunch. But anyway, so that's the concept of events, right? It's basically waiting for something to happen, and when that thing has happened, you do some stuff. The way events are latched onto or attached to in JavaScript, or in jQuery, is the on keyword. There used to be a couple other options. There used to be live and .bind, whatever. Those are all kind of deprecated. They're old. Don't worry about them anymore. .on is how you do it. So you specify a target, which we mentioned before. So for example, this one's the class of some button. So if we have, for example, an input, and let's say the type equals button, and the class equals some button. There we go. And then, what is it? Value equals I'm a button. All right. So by referencing the class here, we'll latch on to this thing, and we're going to say on click. Click is a specific event that can be fired. There are a couple other events. The one you're going to use by far the most is click. There are ones like hover. I think there's a mouse enter, and there's definitely a mouse leave. I'm not positive about the capitalization. You can Google those. The one you're going to almost certainly use the most is click. So we're going to latch onto the click event. Anytime someone clicks on some button, we're going to do something. We put a comma here because our second parameter is going to be a function that we're going to fire. This is the thing that's waiting to go. It's kind of like the runner in the Olympics who's like sitting at the starting blocks just waiting for that flare gun to fire. Or this is the starter gun to fire. This is that guy. He's going to do whatever you want him to do, but he can't do it until someone clicks.
So the on event always takes, the
on function,
on
yeah.
function takes an event and a function, right?
Yep, an event name and a function.
Okay.
Now in here you see I've declared the runner, our actual action, in line. That means that I just shoved it in here. I was just like, we'll write the function real quick. You don't have to do that. You could write a function. Let's say we have an expression here. Someone clicked on me, and that's equal to a new function. And in that function, we alert Shazam. And then later on, we want to attach that function to that button. You can do it that way too. That's totally fine. A lot of times, I'll just do it in line because I'm usually not doing anything too crazy. But be aware that you can create an expression and pass it in to the on function.
So a good reason to do it, like the second alternative, is if you plan on using that more than once.
Yep,
multiple times.
Definitely. So if you've got maybe like some button clicks, maybe some hovers, and you want them all to do the same thing, that's a good option.
Okay.
All right. So for in this, these examples are going to be really simple. We're alerting stuff, right? So in here, we've got just that .click function alert clicked. But you'll notice I didn't use the on keyword. That's because jQuery is really nice about it, and they've already got some of the most interesting events written out as their own little special functions.
Okay.
So this is really a shortcut. The .click is a shortcut for doing on click.
Okay.
There is a .hover, I believe. There is a .mouse over. There's a bunch of them. But that just means that you don't have to use the .on keyword. It's like a shortcut. Nobody wants to have to type .on all the time. Sound good to everybody?
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
All right, cool. So now we've got a way to add events to stuff. This is where, Andrew, you mentioned this keyword. Mm-hmm. So when you're doing quote-unquote stuff with quote-unquote things, one of the handy objects that will exist for you in jQuery is the this keyword. And this, whenever you're inside of a jQuery function, is equivalent to whatever I just manipulated or whatever fired this event, right? So in this case, when I say on click and I refer to this, I'm talking about the button that I just clicked on. If there are 5 buttons, when I click on the first button, this only means the first button. If I clicked on the second button, it only means the second button. But because it comes back as a standard JavaScript object, if you want to do further jQuery stuff with it, you got to wrap it in the $sign this, as a $sign parentheses, right?
Like you did on the second line there, right?
Yep, exactly. So I've got this, and then I want to do more JavaScripty stuff with it. So I say $sign parentheses this. And in this case, I'm going to change the attribute value, which is what a button has for its text, to the words "I was clicked." Pretty boring thing to do, but you will find yourself doing, like, for example, you might disable a button. You might change its color to like gray when you click on it, or like if you have a link, maybe you only want people to click on the link once. So when you click on it, you might want to erase the href, the reference that it's got. So those are all things you might do with this keyword. There's a lot more complicated stuff we can talk about with this, but I think that's where I want to end on for this section. Does anyone have any questions about this? We good?
Mm-hmm.
All right. So finally, I just want to say real quick before I go over the next, I'll just give you a quick demo of what you can do with some really simple jQuery, and then we'll call it a day. But before I do that, I just want to talk about the most important event around. You only usually use it once per page, but it's super important, and that's the ready. So ready is a event that is fired when everything inside of that piece of HTML is done loading. There's no more crap to do. It's good to go, and we usually log on to it with the document. So here, $document or $document.ready means whenever the document is done loading, whenever it's finished getting all of its HTML, it's finished loading all of its JavaScript files, when everything is ready to roll, that's when you want to put all of your jQuery into action. So you'll see here, we've got our $document on ready, and we have this function. This is the runner that's waiting to go.
Mm-hmm.
And then usually inside of here is where you will, let's say, lock on to your sum button. It might be where you show something, things like that.
So the reason for this is to make sure the elements exist on the page before you're trying to do something with them or you'll get an error, right?
Yes. So if you just put your jQuery directly inside of a script tag, so if instead of doing that, you just went script, oops, scrupt, you have no guarantee that when this JavaScript runs, that some button will even exist yet, or that show me will even exist yet. They might not. You're kind of playing dice, and it's a little risky. Every time you use jQuery, I highly recommend that you include it inside the $document.ready method function. So just memorize that. There is a shortcut for that, but I'm not going to tell you what that shortcut is yet because I want it to be seared into your memory that this is an event and how events will work. Okay. You guys feel comfortable about the $document.ready? Mm-hmm. Basically, you just need to forever remember to use it, and then the other reasons can go away. Just always make sure you use it. So finally, and I just paused my computer. That was a good idea. Woohoo! That's still recording? Yes.
Now, I think I've seen before where they had a document.ready with code in it, but then there was also code outside of it with functions.
That's entirely possible. Yes. So you can declare functions. Let me find my cursor. There we go. You can declare functions outside of your document.ready. So let me put that back in real quick. Document.on ready, and helps if I use quotes. Alright, so there's our document.ready. You could have some functions, and that's going to say hide something. Oops, sorry. We'll call it, leave it as that. Alright, and in here, let's say we do some jQuery, so let's something.hide. The setup is totally fine to do outside of your event, but don't call this until your page is ready. It won't actually try to run this function until you actually tell it to run the function.
Okay.
So down here, then you might say sum function. Boom. And you're good.
So does it matter? Like, could you put that function inside of the document.ready too?
You could.
You could put everything
that would
just
just
inside
mean
of there.
that would just mean that your function wasn't created until your document was finished.
Okay.
Usually, you could leave those out of the onReady,
Okay.
but it shouldn't really hurt it. It's going to be a little bit of a extra load.
All right.
Cool.
Extra load if it's outside.
If
Or
it's
inside.
if it's inside, it just means that the rest of your code will execute slightly slower because it won't exist. Like if you put it outside, then it doesn't care when it loads. It just
Okay.
and then it goes, okay, I'm ready, and then it runs your onReady. So everything you put inside your onReady makes your actual event slightly slower to execute.
Oh, okay. Good to know.
So the more code you have in here, the longer it'll take to get to the bottom of the code.
Right.
Gotcha.
Cool. So that's the bare bones of jQuery. Feel free to go back and take a look at this.
So I have the terminology right. The line
Yeah.
62. Dot something is the target.
Dot something is the actual name of this is a selector.
Selector. And then you've got.
But I usually call it the target object or the target element or
Okay. Selector. Then the on is the function. A jQuery function.
Yep, on is a jQuery function.
And then click is what do you call that?
Name of the event.
It's the name of the event, but it's actually
event.
but it's a parameter. So this works. Dot on works exactly like your function worked before, right? So it'll accept a quote unquote forest
Gotcha.
and a quote unquote month,
And why say in quotes?
because it's
Single
just
quote.
it's just a name.
Okay.
It's the name of the event.
So it's the name is a string. So.
Yep.
That's case sensitive.
Yes. Yep.
So it's like on, right? You couldn't do capital O.
No, you couldn't do
Lowercase
capital
n,
on.
yes,
No,
the
it is
lowercase
case sensitive.
And this is in the JavaScript file, or is this an HTML
This
file?
is in so this is this could go in either, but it has to be inside of script tags. So if it's in a JavaScript file, then you're fine. Like a .js file, you can just include that JS file. But if it's in the HTML, it has to be inside of script tags. Yep.
Okay.
And then here is a really simple page. We'll do this. This will be the last thing we mess with. This is a page that I wrote. Yes, I know. Okay. So, I've got an included script. This is a remote script. You'll notice it's got a full HTTPS. So I can pull in scripts from wherever I want on the internet. They don't have to be local. I got some very simple styles, which is just all my divs should float left and be 100 pixels by 100 pixels with no padding. And I've got a blocks container that is just going to have 100% width. And then down here, here's the setup in my HTML. I've got a button that says click me, and I got a container of blocks just called class blocks. Notice I'm in my document.ready, so I don't do anything until the document's ready. And then I attach to some button, and I say when someone clicks on some button, then do this. This is a little tricky because it uses a string formatting, but here I'll show you. We basically iterate 16 times or 15 times. And in those 15 times, we convert our string to a hexadecimal character. You don't need to worry about this line. This line's me. This line's all me. But all you need to know is that could be a 0, a 1, a 2, a 3, a 4, a 5, a 6, a 7, an 8,
All the way up to
a 9,
15?
an A, a B, a C, a D, an E, whatever. Okay. And then I append a piece of HTML, and you see this is where I was saying that it's useful to know string concatenation. So I'm adding a div. That div's going to have a background color of, and then I manually specify these three things. So it'll start out as 000 hexadecimal, then it'll be 111, 222, 333, 444, so on. So it's just going to gradually get lighter. So if I run that, if I actually open that in a HTML page, drag it over here. Oops, come on. Will it drag? Will it drag? No, it won't. Why can't I?
Because you're
it's full screen.
Escape.
Thank you. Does that escape? I don't know how to do that.
Just move it over to the top. Your mouse all the way to the top. All the way over. Yep.
Ah, there we go.
Yeah.
It's sorcery. Some sort of crazy sorcery. Okay, so is that, there we go. All right. Now I'll make this one full screen and I'll forget how to get rid of it. Here we go. I'm going to click this. Shazam! I get a bunch of squares that get gradually lighter. And you can keep doing that over and over and over and over. And it's just going to keep adding black to very, very light gray. I don't think the Fs are included because I stop at 15. So all E's. But you get the point. So all that was done with a very, very small amount of jQuery. And I'll pull that back up again, maybe, if I can figure out.
Go up to the top.
I don't know. Digital sorcery.
We'll keep you in line.
Voodoo. All right. So all that was done with just this amount of jQuery. So it's super powerful. You can use it all over the place to do great things. You can do small things. You can do complicated things. So it's a very approachable framework, and I'm going to go much more into specific uses of it later, but I just wanted to give you this intro to kind of see what it does. Does anyone have any questions?
How did it start at? How did it know to start at black?
Yeah.
Aha! So the reason is I used a for loop. So this is the equivalent of saying while I is less than 16. Actually, we'll go less than or equal to 16, so we include 16. Oh no, sorry, we'll do less than 15. So.
Yeah.
Yep, there we go. Don't want to go over. And then this little I2 string tells it to interpret I as a hexadecimal string. That 16 is the base 16. This is a complicated function, and I originally wasn't going to include it, but it's just so cool. So you probably won't have to do that too much. Okay. But effectively what happens is this will convert the number I, which could be either a 0, a 1, a 2, a 3, a 4, a 5, all the way to 15, to a hexadecimal character, right? And as you guys know from CSS, hexadecimals start at 0, go all the way up to F. And so because I've got this background color down here, so now we're iterating over, we're getting anywhere from a 0 to an F. And then here, I'm setting the background color
to whatever that
to this thing plus this thing plus this thing, which will be 0, 0, 0, or 1, 1, 1, or 2, 2, 2.
Or AAA, or
0, 0, 0 is black?
Yep, all zeros is black. That means there's no pigment on the screen at all.
Right.
And all F's is white. It means it's full light.
Okay.
Does that kind of make sense to everybody?
Yes.
Brittany?
And it wouldn't work if you had spaces where you had the plus.
Right.
Gotcha.
Because then it would be like, what's pound F space, F space,
yeah.
F space? Yeah. Yep. And then actually I can show you the output. We can actually look at that real quick before we disappear. So you can see these elements. Come on. And there we go. So it's 0, 0, 0, 1, 1, 2, 2, 2, 3, 3, and so on. So all the way up to F, F, F. Cool.
So what if you wanted to start at F?
So yeah, you could totally do it the other way around. That's an awesome question. Let me delete this one real quick. So what we could say is var I equals 15. I is greater than or equal to 0.
So okay.
I minus minus. So we want to stop at 0 because we don't want to convert -1 to hexadecimal. It's going to get all kinds of messed up. Because I don't think -1, -1, -1 is a color.
So the I minus minus is how you stop it from.
You're starting at 15 and you're working your way back down to 0, as opposed to starting at 0 and working your way up to 15.
So basically, a for loop is always just a boring version of, simplified version of the individual parts in a while loop. It's just we declare inline, we set our check inline. And then we set our incrementation, or in this case we decrement or decrement,
Got it.
All right, sweet. Well, I'm gonna end that right here, and yeah, I think that's about it for today.